Hi, and welcome to another episode of BYU MBA Horizons. Most people have a specific idea in mind when they think about a tech company. Think ping pong tables and Nerf wars. But what happens when an established tech company starts to mature? Logan Sutherland, today's guest, talks about how work gets done in a multi-generational tech company on today's episode of BYU MBA Horizons. Logan Sutherland, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. I'm really excited to jump into your background and also get a glimpse into your personal career story as seen through the lens of the BYU MBA program.
Well, I'm excited to be here.
If you would, could you start things off by going into a bit of your background, maybe where you're from and the types of things that you did professionally before coming back to the program?
Yeah. So I actually started my business career at like age 8. My dad owned a business. I always wanted to be a business person, so he owned a floral shop, and I would have an annual open house myself with handmade items or items that my grandfather or father would help me make and then turn around and buy, which is a really good business model if you can pull it off.
Yeah.
But at that point, I knew I wanted to do business. So fast forward to college, my undergrad, I did a degree in information systems. I kind of thought at the time that IT was where sustainable competitive advantage would lie. And so did that, had a couple of great years at a company called Safeco Insurance. That was really fascinating, but had kind of gone into it knowing I wanted to come back and get an MBA. At the same time, my family was starting to grow. I currently have four children, and one arrived before I graduated there in my undergrad. But then came to BYU, had an awesome experience here, and it opened up a lot of opportunity. And I've been at Microsoft, I interned there during the program, and then have been there ever since.
Yeah. Did you shop around different master's programs before deciding on BYU?
I did. So I wanted to do something with organizational behavior. We had one OD person at Safeco, and so had the opportunity to have lunch with her and was just fascinated by how she kind of described what she did for work. And so I looked at programs that kind of had a strong reputation and a strong background in this area. And BYU was right there at the top of the list, and it didn't hurt that I kind of had always liked BYU and I'd attended Ricks College or BYU Idaho, so it ended up being exactly the right decision to come here.
Wonderful. So you had a conversation with one of your coworkers about organization design. Mm-hmm. Was that the main experience that sort of focused you more on HR, or what caused you to move from sort of an IT generalist type position to something more focused on HR?
No, and I started, again, I wanted to be in the center of a very important part of the business. I wanted to have my roots in something that was kind of critical to having a competitive advantage. And when I was getting my undergrad degree, it was the late 90s, and it seemed like tech was really what would differentiate you between competition. And then after working for a few years in that field, I started to do some HR sort of things. They had me run an intern program, and I saw the impact of onboarding and bringing people in and socializing them to the company and helping them kind of learn and coaching some people. I was part of our diversity and inclusion program and got to see what business impact that could make. And I kind of at the same time was talking to some other people outside of the company to learn a little bit more about HR. And so when it came time for an MBA, and having that conversation, her job sounded really cool. Little did I know that that's not necessarily how you start an OD career, but it was very influential.
Wonderful. So going back to the program, was there anything that surprised you as you showed up on your first day of classes or even just in your first semester?
Absolutely. The speed at which companies are here to interview you before you know anything. I remember sitting down with Procter & Gamble, and I think, I want to say it was like September 15th or 16th. And we had not had a single discussion about any HR topic other than just looking at our resumes so far. And I was coming from an IT background with really no HR training. And so, needless to say, I did not do very well in my interview. And it was a process for me to learn how to kind of map what I had done before into what I was going to be doing going forward. And that got better, but that was a huge surprise. And then my wife actually had a child during the first semester, which is not the best timing from a family planning standpoint. Awesome experience. But that was not a surprise during the first semester, but it was kind of the workload and everything together was made for a very memorable few months.
So what was your coping strategy to get through that very rigorous initial phase of the MBA program?
Honestly, I had an awesome team. The people I was working with made it bearable. It was interesting. I don't know exactly how the groups were formed. They generally do cross-functional teams. And there were 3 of us who were studying HR on my team, and then a supply chain and a marketing person. So I became kind of the de facto finance guy, just totally by lack of having someone else as an option. And it was just really nice to have the give and take, and we had a lot of kind of ridiculous, inside jokes that we had within our team, and a lot of long nights and hard work. But really, it was a team. And then it was also interesting for me to realize that during the first semester, I had always focused so much on the scholastic part of school that finding a job was very important, and that was kind of a key portion of that first semester. And I didn't fully anticipate that because I had always gone about school focusing primarily on the learning and on what was going on, and that definitely happened a lot. But there was this kind of competing other interest that was kind of a second job.
So when it came time to focus more fully on pursuing an internship and full-time employment, what was that experience like for you?
It was humbling at first. There were several of my classmates who were much more marketable from the get-go than I was, who either had previous HR experience, which helped them in kind of the early phases, or were just better at interviewing or better in that process. And so it was humbling to go through and have a few rough experiences up front. But that it definitely worked out. I had an offer from a great company that just didn't happen to be kind of in the field. I've loved technology. That's part of the reason my degree was in that, or my undergraduate degree. But we wanted to get into a technology company if we could. And so up front, I had an offer from another company, and they had a deadline, and I had been calling Microsoft because at Safeco, I actually worked up in the Seattle area, and so I'd known a lot of people at Microsoft and heard good things. But I had initially some really good response. This person said, "Oh, we'd love to talk with you. Give me a few weeks, and I'll get back with you." And then I never heard anything, and then never heard anything, and subsequently had this offer and this approaching deadline. I came to find out that he had left the company in the interim, so hence the no reply. And so finally got on the radar of another person there, and they said, "Okay, well we'll have a phone interview with you." No one from BYU had ever gone there, and so they didn't really have a lot of background or impetus to hire a person from this program. But they interviewed a couple of us, and ended up flying us back there. All the while, I was asking for extensions from this other company, and they were very gracefully allowing me that. But it ended up being exactly the right thing for our family, and so I was glad that we waited. That we waited for what was the right thing, and also glad to be able to make it back to the tech world.
Excellent. So you did your internship then with Microsoft, got the full-time offer. And then your first role out of the program, you were hired into what is called the Tracks program. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And what, because I know that a lot of companies have what are called rotational programs. Could you kind of explain what a rotational program, what its purpose is, and maybe what some of the features of the rotational program that you experienced were?
Yeah, absolutely. So rotational programs in general are designed to give people a breadth of experience early in their career and do so in a facilitated way, so they have an opportunity to, at Microsoft, for example, it's all within HR, but there's lots of different kind of specializations within HR, and so you could be a generalist or do something in compensation or staffing. And so that, the way the Tracks program works is you do a couple full-time or one-year rotations. And then after that, you graduate, we call it, from the program and are released into kind of the general population.
Kind of the free market of the internal job market.
Yeah. And so in terms of what the purposes are, like I said, from an employee standpoint, it gives you a good breadth of experience. From a company standpoint, because I now manage that Tracks program.
Interesting.
One of the main value drivers is that it helps to break down barriers that exist because people have, a specialization that they prefer and maybe have grown up through. And so throughout the rest, there is movement across different functions within Microsoft, but the Tracks program has really accelerated that and has helped connect, give empathetic connections between functions that may not normally have a lot of crossover between them. So you have someone who's been a generalist who has also done learning and development. And so, a learning and development initiative comes out and it finds a very ready audience and maybe an understanding audience because someone has worked there who is a Tracks person, whereas in the past, people may have either kind of not been good customers or not understood what the intention was. And so that's been a really beneficial thing from a company standpoint, also to create a good community of people across an early in career bunch of people.
Okay. And you mentioned a moment ago that right after you graduated from this rotational program, you turned around and were appointed as the manager of this program.
Yeah, so it was a few years after.
Oh, it was a few years after. Okay.
Yeah, but that was, you got to be careful what you ask for, I guess, because in the program I thought, boy, if I was managing this, I'd do this and I'd do this and I'd do this differently. And so about 3 years after I graduated the program, there was actually the program came open and I was kind of ready for my next opportunity at that time. And so now I get to be the one who is inspiring other people to say, boy, if I was running the program, I'd do this and I'd do this and I'd do that.
So with Microsoft being a tech company, does that mean that a lot of the people that you're interacting with are not in the same location? Do you have remote interactions with various team members?
Yeah, so the role I took after I graduated from the program was with our legal and corporate affairs team, which my first role was with Xbox, which my oldest son, thought was amazing. And he would ask, I'd come home and he'd say, did you make a game today, Dad? Mm-hmm. No, not really. But if for some reason when I went home and said I work with lawyers and government affairs professionals, that wasn't quite as interesting to him. And even to me, I didn't, there were some interesting components with it to get to your question about remote. It had an international scope. There was about 50 countries that I'd be working with and teams that are spread out across that. So yes, I have had some good international or remote experiences. It actually ended up being an opportunity that, unforeseen to me and unbeknownst to me when I was considering it up front, was one of the best professional experiences, if not the best professional experience of my career to this point, because at Microsoft, we're a very big target for potential legal action. And so everything kind of runs through the legal and corporate affairs group, which is who I was working with. So I got to see both things very early on in this kind of from a strategic standpoint, a lot of our business that we were trying to break into new countries or kind of institute new business models, it had to come through that first, which was really fun to me because, again, going back to someone who wanted to always do business and see, okay, this is a whole new way of doing business that we're, and it was several years ago, so it was kind of at the inception of when we were shifting from selling a box of software and putting that at the store or signing up a company for 3 years worth of Office or whatever, to now when it's a service and there's a very different business model. But that was all happening kind of in its early stages with that role.
So you went into that legal and corporate affairs support role in HR, expecting one thing, but then coming out and having a very different experience, but in a good way.
Yeah. We had a leadership team that had people from almost every continent and very, very drastic differences in how they had grown up experiencing leadership and how they thought about leadership and how they communicated. And so a big part of the value that I could add was to help the leadership team function and to help, for those who might be a little bit more inclined to dominate or push back, to help temper that a little bit. And for those who may kind of sit passively by and culturally being a very acceptable and kind of expected thing, to help draw out some contributions from them and work with them individually to honor the cultural differences that we had, but to also help get the most out of this team. I'd have never seen that coming. I mean, it was something that I thought, it'll be good to learn more about different employment laws and kind of experience a different set of things. But it was a fascinating experience for me.
On a recent episode of this program, we interviewed another alumnus who works for a tech company, but her company is fairly young as far as tech companies go. It's about 10 years old, rapid growth, and she also does HR for that organization. What is it like to do HR for another tech company that's a little more mature in its growth?
It's interesting. I will say, even so, I've been there about 8 years. The shift that I've seen over the course of that 8 years is interesting. I know from a demographic standpoint, I think we were around 32 years of age when I started as an average age, and it's up close to 39 at this point. And also the company is about 40 years old versus a 10-year-old tech company. So there's some goodness in that there's a lot of process that has already been figured out and a lot of things that we know how to do well. There's also some challenges, both kind of from an overall organizational standpoint. There's a lot of inertia. It's a big company, and with that there comes a measure of bureaucracy that you have to navigate a big company. But also we serve our products and services serve everyone in the world potentially. That's the goal, is to appeal to every person of every age. And of every profession and disposition. So we have the challenge of having a workforce that's getting older and has different sorts of needs. There's maybe more families and other demands and other priorities that you start to see within this workforce than a younger company, both kind of demographically younger and organizationally younger. But we need that. And we hire. I mean, the program I run, we hire college grads, and as a company, we hire over 2,000 college grads every year. So we've got a kind of a growing set of different types and kind of different generations of people working together. And so part of that, there's a lot of benefit to that in terms of kind of the creative dissonance that we see with people seeing things in a different way, and a generation that kind of grew up as the first people using computers and their family, and now to a generation where they've done everything on social media and have been using computers since they were 2.
Yeah, the digital native.
Yeah. And to have them working together presents a lot of really good opportunities for serving a broad segment of people around the world. But it can also create some interesting dynamics when it comes to how do we get work done and where do I work, and do I have to come into the office to work, or do you mind if I work for the first 3 hours of my day at home and then miss traffic and then come in and attend a few meetings, then go home and do what I want to do, and then hop on at night. And that tension and those dynamics are at play. But I will say the leadership of the company is attuned to them, but there's a lot of opportunity to help in that area.
What are some of the things that you have seen, and this could apply with Microsoft or with maybe other tech companies that you've seen, what's being done to kind of bridge that generational gap with, some employees that are, like you mentioned, they adopted computers, a little while ago, but they didn't grow up with them versus these young people right out of college. What have you found to be effective in kind of bringing those two groups together?
Yeah, it's one thing that we've done, and I think we're probably mostly at this stage still, is just creating awareness that there are differences, and helping people have that as part of the set of filters that they put on when they think about a situation. So they don't see someone and say, "Oh, what a lazy person! They didn't come in till 10 o'clock." It might be that they've already done 3 hours of work. It's just in a different way. So we actually do have a series of kind of trainings and conversations that we have that we will do with teams or even with a lot of our people managers to help bring it to their awareness, so they know and can see these dynamics as they happen. And kind of from a similar vein, there's other things that we do in terms of the other differences. I mean, there's kind of cultural differences and other things that we also try to make people aware about. But from a generational standpoint, we try to keep it on the top of people's minds, so there's not kind of faulty assumptions going on.
Right. Shifting now back to the MBA program itself, what would you say the overall impact on your career has been from the MBA program?
It's been tremendous. There are many times when I realize that I have the opportunity that I've been able to get into the door and even have an opportunity to be part of the career that I am now because I got an MBA, and because that MBA was from a very well-respected place. So I think, for me, I was transitioning careers. I had been an IT person, and if you were to take and say, here's an IT person and here's an HR person, compare their skill sets, probably not the most similar people in the world, but because I had the MBA, a company like Microsoft was willing to take a risk on me, and so I absolutely owe the fact that I have a job at Microsoft right now to the MBA program and to the great reputation that it had, and then that's I don't want to make it sound like that's all. Because the learning and particularly the friendships and the network that I acquired while I was here have made, both from a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint, a tremendous difference in my life. I have friends that I've been able to pick up the phone or send an email and put a problem before them and get their professional input, and it's not something that happens a lot. Outside of just a company of Microsoft we have 1,600 HR employees. A lot of times that's the group of people that you think about. But to be able to bring ideas in from the outside, that network is just tremendous. And then, again, not just from a professional standpoint, some of the best friends that I still have are people that I came to know in this program.
That's incredible. It's a great value.
It is.
Well, as we wrap things up today, do you have any advice for our current students to fully take advantage of their time while here in the program?
Yeah, so one, just to go back to what we just talked about, don't neglect the time that it takes to build and foster the relationships and the network that you have here. You are in classes and are on teams with some of the most capable people that you'll meet in your life. And there are extraordinarily bright people at Microsoft and at lots of companies, but still some of the best and most amazing people I know were here at this school. And then second, and something that is very much a 2020 hindsight sort of a thing, while you're here and while you're having the insights that you do in your class or in the project work that you do or the field studies that you may be a part of, find a way to capture that and make it accessible to you when you become a professional. I wish that I had a cheat sheet to say, you remember you loved this topic about innovation that you had. It's in this book on this page, and I could just refer to that. Or you learned about group dynamics in this class, and so I could have a way for me to readily access all of the amazing things that I learned in a more in a less time intensive way, where I'm flipping through books and trying to find that amazing chapter that I read or that aha moment that I had. So find a way to prepare yourself to be able to access all the great things that you're learning now, and I think it's very much a worthwhile investment.
Well, Logan Sutherland, it has been a great conversation. Very grateful for your insights, your advice for current and prospective students. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.